Hey, welcome everyone to the first episode of Comics and Beyond. Um, in my last video, I kind of talked a little bit about what this series show is going to be about. Basically, when I do my haul videos, my playlist videos, um, some of them there's so much stuff going on that I would love to comment on, but I usually run along with those, because I do the mini reviews and end up talking about a book or two a little beyond a few words, just I just ramble on that there are things that have caught my attention that I really can uh talk about. So on the one side, I'll probably comment about stuff that I keep hearing about news and things that catch my attention throughout the week that I can really, talk too much about in my regular videos. Um, I've also, talked about doing little like reviews of old storylines, like retro reviews, but usually don't have too much time on my hands to do them, and or I do, but I have other things to do, and I just keep, not doing them, and uh, probably, I'll probably do those reviews here, and probably more in-depth reviews of some of my favorite books or books that I've read that, I might need to comment on a little bit more. Let share my thoughts and things like that. I didn't want to make, a very specific vlog. But I did want to have something more formal, if you will, just not just talking about rambling on about something that's on my mind, but sort of go through segments. Also, and I believe Art Doughty has talked about this in some of his videos, that the community is not just about comic books, but about the various type of things we collect, and like statues and action figures, retro toys, video games, so on and so forth. uh I also have my own um interest that I really haven't had the time to talk about and to share, because I don't collect a lot of things. If you never have like full collections of anything, but throughout my life, I've definitely collected things, you know, uh, movies and um, sports trading cards. Mostly aren't full sets or anything. Um, I read a lot of books, and I do have collected a few series, books in the past. I've had a I was a big fan growing up of the Hardy Boys. Recently, I'm reading a lot of the Philip Marlowe stuff by Raymond Chandler. I'm trying to get all of his novels and short stories. Same thing goes for Dashiell Hammett, and I've read all of his. I'm trying to read all of his stories as well. So I've got a few collections of those novels and stories, and I'm just about to finish getting everything I can get my hands on that he's written. And so I'll probably talk about that and about other books I've read that have caught my attention. And I have an interest in old time radio, which is probably my latest. Well, not. my latest interest. I've been getting into the whole all-time radio thing since probably around 2007 or 2008, and it really all started with comics that actually brought me into listening all-time radio programs, and it was basically this guy, Superman. As we all know, um, back in 1940, just maybe even less than 2 years since his debut in Action Comics #1, National, DC, licensed the radio program which went on the air in February of 1940. So I had heard about the radio program for quite a while, and trying to listen to it. And after I actually got my first iPod, getting into iTunes, the first thing I searched for was any podcast with the old radio show, which or radio program, which is the correct term, um, of Superman, and that kind of you know led me into picking up other radio shows. Now I don't collect all-time radio. I don't have boxes and boxes of CDs or old cassettes. I usually listen to the radio, those old radio shows or those old radio programs through three ways. Firstly, through the iTunes podcasts. I have a few of those radio show programs. Um, through download, I also download them from a page, archive.org. I get a lot of those old radio programs, from, they usually, if a lot of episodes exist, you get all of them, or the few that exist or are known to exist are uploaded there, and you can now download them. And through iTunes, internet radio, which is I listen to a station in Illinois called 1710 Antioch. It's an AM radio over there. I mean community radio or something like that. Through iTunes, and I've discovered a ton of shows. And sometimes those shows went or those programs became TV shows in the 50s. Um, and a while back I actually showed this photograph of Jack Benny and Dennis Day. And of course, the first time I ever saw Jack Benny was in a movie he did called George Washington Slept Here when I was a teenager with my granddad. And years later, as I was going through the podcasts, I also saw his program, and it had been probably maybe 10 years since I saw, or less than a little over 10 years since I saw that movie, but I kind of knew who Jack Benny was, and I downloaded that show, and I keep downloading, even if, especially with the podcasts, they usually sometimes just reload older reload episodes. So I probably heard an episode, you know, when I started, and the people that have that podcast, would re-upload those episodes. So even though if I get repeat shows, or repeat programs, uh, I enjoy those, and like everything in life kind of leads one way to another, you know. Um, Listening to old time radio, uh, and listening to a few shows and learning, doing little research on those shows kind of led me to other shows, and listening to that online radio station, at least online for me. I discovered, like I said, a ton of shows. So you know, I think um, I've I've probably heard and downloaded, I don't know, maybe a half dozens of shows. Spent hours listening to those. Well, not hours, but in my iPod, I keep downloading those shows. I got the comedy shows. I got Jack Benny, I got The Great Gildersleeve, I've got Fibber McGee and Molly, and I love those really great shows from the 40s. From the 40s. Uh, Father Knows Best, which most people might know it as a TV show, started in radio in the early 50s, I believe. Um, I think started 1940, 49 and 19, or 1950. Uh, um, uh, Gunsmoke, you know, I never thought of myself as a Western fan, which is weird because when I was younger, I used to watch, Bonanza when it reran here in Mexico. I watched it with my granddad. And when I was even younger, I actually was a fan of the Lone Ranger, and there was a animated show series done by I think Filmation that did that one. I used to love that show. I used to play the Lone Ranger when I was a kid, and I've gotten access to the original Lone Ranger show program as well, and so I'm still listening to Gunsmoke. I mean, the radio program lasted 9 years. I prefer it over, the TV version because, I actually read by an account done by one of the actors that was there, Harry Bartell, who did a ton of radio programs, that, James Arness and the actor that played Doc would criticize the writing, but, they weren't really familiar with the radio version, which is, those early Gunsmoke TV episodes were adaptations, or were adapted from the radio show, from the radio scripts written by John Meston, which was a main writer for Gunsmoke. In fact, Gunsmoke um, debuted around 19, I think 19, around 1951 or 52. There had been like about a year or two since, William Paley ordered a mature Western, because most Westerns, the Lone Ranger, uh, uh, I think Roy Rogers had had Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy were more shows that aimed at younger listeners, at kids. So he wanted two things: a more mature, realistic Western show, and that the main character be more like Philip Marlowe, because CBS actually was running Philip Marlowe at the time, and Paley was a big fan of that program, so he wanted a much more realistic Western show with a sort of Western take on Marlowe. So I think there were two what they call audition programs, which is the equivalent to the pilots of a TV show. that were done and shelved. And I think one of the contenders for the main role, uh, I think he had a commitment to a movie or something that he couldn't really do it. And I think that the guy I actually liked more. A few years later, those audition tapes were, those audition shows were discovered. It was reworked, and actually got um, it was redone, rewritten based on these audition shows programs. Uh, and it had the I can't remember the actor's name. William Conrad, who actually got the role for the radio version with William McNair as Doc and oh, Parley Bear as Chester. With I can't remember the girl that actually the actress that actually played Miss Kitty in the radio program, but Miss Kitty, unlike the TV version, which was watered down, for a much more general audience. She was a saloon owner, but in the radio program, um, she was actually a saloon girl. So basically, she was a prostitute. Um, she was referred to as a hostess at times. She was a saloon girl, and she was a friend of Matt's, and sorry, and the show was a big success. I mean, it lasted until the early 60s, even when the TV show was going on. And in fact, when the TV show was going to be started, the people in CBS radio heard about it. They really tried to get the radio cast onto the TV show. And in fact, and you might find those on the web, a series of photographs with the original cast in costume, in costume in, I think, some ghost town or somewhere in the California area, uh, photographed, in character, um, to try to sell it to CBS TV. But, because William Conrad was a big guy, very portly guy, uh, he didn't have the Hollywood look that they needed. I mean, you look at those pictures, they look like they were taken back in the, mid 1800s, during the, during, or the late 1800s. Very authentic. They said no, uh, which was a bad thing, which was, uh, a very, I guess, in my opinion, a very, um, you know, not a very fair situation, because, these people knew the characters from head to toe, they knew them perfectly. And I've watched some of the TV, some episodes of the TV show, and, you get your Hollywood look, you get younger actors, because, they were a bit older as well. Parley Bear was, a middle-aged guy at that time. You could actually, I mean, and these guys actually did do TV, except for the actress who played Kitty. She really didn't do much work after, and she basically retired from acting or from doing anything else. Uh, like I said, I prefer the radio version of Gunsmoke. I mean, I think William Conrad, just through his voice, you get a very uh, authoritative. You kind of imagine his presence. Like he's Marshall Dillon, and he's the authority, and just through his voice, he you know transmitted that. Arnaz as Matt Dillon, I don't see him very convincing. Good looking guy. But I don't know. I don't think he had that that presence that you imagine when you listen to Conrad's voice doing the that role. And they actually criticize their writing as well, saying the writers didn't know the characters. So you know they're entitled to their opinion, but it's one that I disagree because obviously they did know these character the characters. They had been writing them for a few years when the TV version came out. So maybe for the radio show for that. And speaking of full cats going from radio to TV, Dragnet is another show that I really enjoy listening to, a program that I really enjoy listening to. Um, you know, this show was basically created by the lead actor. Um, I keep forgetting names, and I've noticed this guy's names really well. But from the radio show to the TV show, the entire cast was there. So there was a little bit more control on that for that cast. Joe Friday. In the end, as a TV program, it was very popular. That when the original run ended, in the late 50s, I believe, it was revived in the mid to late 60s. So it really didn't have you know I think I think a lot of people criticize that show because there was one of the very first procedural police shows. I mean, this is like the grandfather of shows like Law and Order, and in fact, I think they even did a of Law and Order. And Dick Wolf, the producer of Law and Order, tried to revive the old Dragnet TV show, which you know it wasn't very successful at the time because basically uh you know it ended up being another cop show by then. When it started back in the late 40s, started 1949, around the mid 50s on radio, and then as well as on TV. uh it was a very innovative type of police show. Realism was the main focus for the show. A lot of research went into it. Supposedly, these are all real cases from the LA police. But its criticism was, the Los Angeles police was known for being corrupt. Uh, of course, excessive force as well. Things that weren't really um, talked about uh, in the radio. They just focused on the type of law enforcement, and of course we're talking this was at a time before Miranda rights existed. So the sort of due process we expect now, warrants and things like that. Sometimes you didn't, they weren't even mentioned the on the show. I mean, I remember an episode but they were going to search for in a guy's home to see if he had killed and murdered his wife in the garden. Uh, Nowadays, you actually have to get a warrant and search, the premises. In this episode, they actually tricked the guy to leave his home and then have it searched. So I often found that as being, well, I'm pretty sure that really actually did happen because, um, you know, um, I don't know if that actually happened, but being that the show created by Jack Webb, I remember that, by Jack Webb, Jack Webb had done all this research. Um, Doing that, would be seen as a violation of someone's privacy. So, I thought that actually happened. You know, we've come a long way if police um do that. I mean, here in Mexico, the same. You have to have a search warrant to look at and do searches. By listening to these episodes, Brian, that wow. I mean, really, no warrant to search the guy's house. You just kind of take him somewhere else, and he does that, and the police can basically enter it. For the most part, I never actually even remember any episode where you actually had uh, a suspect, calling his lawyer. I mean, where's the right for a suspect to get a lawyer to defend him? I mean, you have that guy being questioned, you know, as a suspect, and where's the lawyer? Where's your one phone call to call your lawyer? None of them really had lawyers, and the one time, and I'm of the episode I was talking about, that actually called his lawyer, and the police saw the lawyer as as someone who is just hindering the investigation. You know, um, so I was shocked just listening to those shows and to that program and watching the TV show all that, which I've seen a few of those episodes. Um, and seeing shows like Law and Order where you do have people getting their rights, and you're seeing how in 50, 60 years things have, I guess, changed. But that's just a radio show, so I don't know if that wasn't a rule thing. Um, Another show which I also knew about was The Shadow. I haven't really listened to a lot of Shadow recently. In fact, the podcast I actually had gotten The Shadow from, I think it went defunct. So I haven't listened to a lot of Shadow. But I kind of knew about The Shadow, I guess because of movies, Orson Welles. He was the first actor to play the Shadow as the Shadow because the Shadow was originally a narrator. Um, Street and Smith, had a magazine. They actually lasted a radio show or worked out a radio show, and where they would promote this magazine they had, which at this moment I can't remember which magazine it was, and they had the narrator called the Shadow tell the story, and he came up with phrases like the weed of crime bears bitter fruit, crime doesn't pay, the shadow knows, And the radio show was the radio program was very popular in the mid 30s. Um, sorry, uh, that people were asking for the Shadow magazine, which led Street and Smith to create the Shadow character and the Shadow magazine. So Orson Welles was the first actor, like I said, to play the Shadow on radio as the Shadow character, not as the Shadow narrator of of, of, of stories. Uh, and basically, the Shadow with Orson Welles had a lot of his Mercury Theater players in roles, um, uh, playing various roles. Um, oh, give me a sec. Um, right, Agnes Moorehead. Uh, Agnes Moorehead played Margot Lane through the 2 seasons that Orson Welles was a Shadow. In fact, I believe he only played like 1 season, and then there was like a summer show of the Shadow. I think it was like 1938, 39. Then in the summer of 39, um, that was the Shadow in the summer, because usually on radio the idea of rebroadcast or reruns didn't exist. So whenever a radio show went or radio program went off the air in the summer, you'd have a different show um, replace the program that ran at that time until the summer break ended. But the show was so popular that they decided to just run it throughout the summer. And in 1939, in the fall 1939, uh, Agnes Moorehead returned for one more season as Margot Lane, but there was a different actor playing the Shadow. By then, um, you know, um, a different actor playing the Shadow. That lasted for a few seasons. Then the whole cast was replaced. Uh, but I believe Agnes Moorehead played it one more season as Margot Lane before somebody else took over the role, which is something I've really find extraordinary about radio, is that you could change actors in a role without you know so easily. And the fact that a lot of actors that play worked on radio could appear in several shows with different types of roles. An actor could play a leading role, he could play a supporting role. They could go from serious drama to comedy to a detective show. And uh, one of them was Joseph Kearns, who played the original Mr. Wilson in the Dennis the Menace TV show before he passed away. Uh, he played uh, serious roles in detective mystery programs. He actually worked with Jack Benny in comedy on the Jack Benny program, or the other program, or whatever program he was on, depending on the I think it was the Lucky Strike program, where Kearns actually entered became part of the regular cast of Jack Benny's crew. Uh, he did comedy, he did this serious drama as well. Uh, and they were so versatile back then. Was work, and so whatever work you got, you did it, and several actors would play a leading role. For example, I mean, the shadow got changed at least 3 or 4 times as well. So one famous big change, for example, happened in a show that I already mentioned. The Great Gildersleeve. The Great Gildersleeve was as the first spin-off show, um, the first proper situation comedy. It spun off the Fibber McGee and Molly radio program, which was a comedy show. It didn't have a sort of situation to it, but it had segments, where we had like segments with different characters interacting with Fibber McGee and Molly, Jim and Mary and Jordan. Those are the real names. Uh, in like little sketches, all tied into a larger story, but they were like little sketches, and you had like musical break. You had like a band break, where the where you had a group, a band playing, the musical break, just music, instrumental break, if you will, and they actually had a, a vocal segment as well. Uh, so the actor Harold Perry played this played various characters actually that went by the name Gildersleeve, and the most famous version of Gildersleeve was he was uh, Fibber McGee and Molly's neighbor, next door neighbor, and he was like a frenemy of Fibber, so they would just go at it with words, and the character became very popular. That they gave him his own show, The Great Gildersleeve. I believe it was in 1941. So from 1941, and again, three different actresses actually played. Well, it was called The Great Gildersleeve. There was oh the he went to this town from Wistful Vista, which is the town where Fibber McGee and Molly takes place. Um, uh, Gilead went to a town called Summerfield to take care of his niece and nephew who had become orphan. So you had his little nephew Leroy, who was played by an actor that years later uh, would voice that little. Um, uh, you remember the old uh, Rocky and Bullwinkle show? You had Mr. Peabody and Sherman. He voiced the uh, the Sherman character from Mr. Peabody, segment from the old Rocky and Bullwinkle TV show, which I actually got a chance to watch, few years ago actually years ago. Um, I can't remember now his name. And his niece Marjorie, which was voiced by actually three actresses. Lorraine Tuttle was the first actress to voice uh, the character, and Lorraine Tuttle was a very versatile actress. Uh, she could play any type of role. She was, in fact, a bit older than what the character of Marjorie was supposed to be, Marjorie. Um, and there were two different actresses that actually voiced the character after, which were more around the age range of the character Marjorie. One of them actually played this character, Judy Forrester. Um, Her name is Louise something, I can't remember right now. Uh, and that show original run, or Carol Perry as a character, lasted until the 1949-1950 season, when Harold Perry made the move from NBC to CBS. And this era around 1949-1950 uh, was around that time that um, became as a CBS raid on NBC, because a lot of people working in NBC left the NBC to CBS. In fact, the whole thing actually started with Jack Benny, who was invited, I guess, by Paley to go to CBS and giving a very good deal. And Benny said, "All right." He moved his whole show over there. Um, um, he's he moved his program over to CBS, and a lot of people actually followed Benny to CBS, so it became as the CBS raid. But it was more about CBS is offering better opportunities, so Harold Perry actually decided to leave NBC and go to CBS. Actually, he wanted to move the whole Gildersleeve program to CBS, which unfortunately he couldn't. First of all, he really didn't own the character of Gildersleeve. I believe NBC did, and Kraft Foods, who sponsored the show, didn't really want to move the from NBC, so they replaced Perry with a different actor, which is, I can't remember his name right now. Was a friend of Perry's as well. They had a very similar voice. So while Perry went and tried to have his own show or program in CBS called the Harold Perry program, uh, which didn't do so well. Uh, Perry, the show continued with this new actor, which I can't remember his name right now. Um, uh, so anyway, so that's a case where an actor is actually replaced by another actor to just move on the show, and an actor that actually had a very similar voice to the original actor who played that character. The only thing that didn't stay in the show was Harold Perry had a very particular type of laugh, and that was never used again when the new actor took over. I mean, he was a friend of Perry's, he respected him and said, that's Perry's laugh, that's Ralph's laugh, so, it's gonna be a different thing. Unfortunately, by that time, especially around the mid 50s, during the 50s, the show actually went down, and the writing wasn't as top notch as it was before. In fact, Joss Whedon's grandfather wrote for that show. I think during the mid 40s, he actually wrote a lot of episodes of that show program. Then it became a TV show, which wasn't again as good as the as the radio program had been, and in fact, uh, you know, the uh, the actor that replaced Harold Perry for the 1950-51 season and onward said, writers really didn't know the characters. In the first place, they didn't really understand who Throckmorton Gildersleeve, sorry, Throckmorton Gildersleeve was, so that's why it failed. Another show that failed was Fibber McGee and Molly. Instead of getting, Harold, Jim, and Marion Jordan to play their characters on TV. I mean, they actually had done movies. They did a few movies for both, Fibber McGee and Molly and the Great Gildersleeve in the 40s. They didn't want him in a TV show. They wanted younger people. And in fact, one of the actress that actually played Molly, Kathy Lewis, was, a regular actress for a time being, for a while, in the Great Gildersleeve program. She actually had done several radio programs as well. She became Molly. Harold Perry actually had a role there, but not as Gildersleeve. I think he actually became took the role of the town's mayor in the film Again Molly show. Again, it failed. They didn't get the original actors. They didn't really understand the characters. The writers. So a lot of these radio programs, you know, uh, some of them were successful on TV for a while. Some weren't. As for actors, and I've done a lot of research on a lot of these actors. There's one particular actor, Gerald Moore. Gerald Moore. In the 50s, he did a few B movies, a few science fiction B movies. Since the early 40s, he been doing a lot of radio. He appeared on a regularly on a radio program called The Whistler, but as a lead actor, in playing lead roles to supporting roles as well. Uh, his his biggest role was, as Philip Marlowe on the Philip Marlowe radio program on, on CBS, which I mentioned before. More actually, and like I said, in a few, there are few B movies, um, which I actually have gotten a chance to see some of those sci-fi movies he did. He had like I believe he had a guest spot, in Bonanza. He did a guest spot in Bonanza, which I actually saw as well. Um, um, but a lot of these radio actors um, went on to do voice work, and two of Moore's biggest roles. One was Green Lantern in the Filmation uh, Green Lantern shorts, and the Justice League one they Filmation did, and he voiced Mr. Fantastic in the Hanna-Barbera Fantastic Four cartoon, which was pretty much his last job because Moore died in 1968. Another actor, or I guess actress, that transcended as well was Virginia Gregg. Virginia Gregg, also a very versatile actress. She could play young people. She could play all women, all women, young girls, young women, young. Appeared in tons of radio programs. She actually um, two of her, at least to me, two of her biggest roles on radio was there was this show in the late 40s with Chad, actor Dick Powell, who in the 30s, he appeared in a lot of Warner Brother movies. He did the oh this very famous series of musicals done by Busby Berkeley. Um, I'm trying a blank. And before that he was a crooner. Uh, he was one of the first actors to actually play Philip Marlowe because he did Farewell My Lovely, which before RKO, which was retitled uh, oh Murder My Sweet. I think it was Murder My Sweet, um, which that movie was retitled Murder My Sweet because the original title Farewell My Lovely, the people at RKO thought, that it sounded like a musical, so they won't confuse the public. Uh, had, you know, a show because of that movie, that for Philip Marlowe movie he did, uh, which was a big risk, not for him as an actor, because he was tired of musicals. That's why he left Warner's. He did a few movies for Fox as well. He actually went to RKO because he wanted to have his own be. Heard that RKO was looking for a new studio head or something like that. So he wanted to actually, not just be an actor, but he was a very savvy businessman. And um, and he wanted to, see if he could get a job as a studio head. Uh, I think that was the reason, yes, if I recall correctly. So anyway, he went over to RKO. RKO wanted him to make musicals, because that was that he had been doing that all the time. But instead, he said he wanted to do this Philip Marlowe film, this Raymond Chandler adaptation of Farewell My Lovely. Uh, the people at RKO say, well, okay, sure, why not let him do this movie and then we just put him in musicals. As it turns out, Murder My Sweet was a big hit, and you know, Dick Powell didn't sing ever again on film. So his success in doing this film, and a few other film noir type stuff, he got a radio program playing a detective, which I can't remember for the life of me what the name of that show was. But in the late 40s, he got another show called Richard Diamond, Private Detective, and Virginia Gregg actually played Diamond's, rich uh, Upper West Side girlfriend, Helen. So she played that role for a while. And she also was part of Jack Webb's group of actors in on Dragnet. She played several roles there. From sometimes even playing two or three roles at a time. But it was like a leading role, not a supporting role. There was another show called program called Let George Do It, and at some point in the mid 50s, in fact, they were starting to reuse a few scripts. Anyway, Virginia Gregg moved to the Let George Do It program, and they had to play George, the lead character, girlfriend slash assistant Claire Brooks, and the actress who played Claire Brooks went to the Richard Diamond program to play, Virginia Gregg's role. Uh, so to me, those were like the big roles Virginia Gregg played on radio, besides all those other supporting roles. I think she was also on Gunsmoke, on the TV show Gunsmoke, I and of course she appeared on the Dragnet TV show, and she had a guest spot, I think, if I remember correctly, in on Bonanza as well. Uh, but you might not be aware of it, but she actually did the voice of Norman Bates' mother in Psycho, and I think she did it in the three Psycho movie in the Psycho movie, and the other two I think they did after that. She didn't get any credit um for that role, but that's her doing that playing that doing the voice of the voice of Norman Bates' mother. Um, you know, so yeah, so there's a lot of information about radio that I've gathered up. There are I mean, a lot, like I said, a lot of actors actually went to do, voice for animation. Jean Vanderpyle, who everybody knows as the voice of Wilma in the Flintstones. She had a major role in the Father Knows Best radio program. I think she replaced the original actress that played her mother sometime in some seasons. I didn't even know when she did. I think like in 53 or something like that. B. Bernadette, who appeared in tons of radio programs. You know her as the voice of Betty. In fact, Jim Vanderpump actually also played did the voice for Rosie the Rabbit in the Jetsons, and B. Bernadette, the voice of Betty in the Flintstones. She did a lot of serious roles. She did a lot of comedy. In fact, she was one of the phone operators in the Jack Benny program as well. Um, she went on to do that. She did do a live TV show as well, which I can't remember, a TV show as well, but I can't remember which show it was. Um, Vic Perrin was another actor who went on to continue doing voice-over work on animated TV shows as well as cartoons. Um, and when all when the type of programming changed on radio, when TV started to dominate, uh, these actors found jobs on screen and off screen, doing voiceover work, um, and you know to bring it all back into a circle. Uh, it was a radio program and a movie of that radio program that got me to try out this comic book, A Date with Judy, which I've actually talked extensively about in my earlier videos, so I won't talk too much about it. But uh, this show was very popular for a while. As I mentioned, in the last video, as I mentioned in there, there was a movie adaptation of it with Jane Powell as Judy. It had a huge cast of actors working it. You had Elizabeth Taylor, you had Carmen Miranda, who was very popular at that time. Robert Stack, from The Untouchables and later Unsolved Mysteries. Another show I remember watching when I was a kid. Uh, and yeah, so having done this research on that show, which I've actually heard a few episodes. I believe there are like only 13 shows available that I know of. Uh, you know, there was also a show that or a program where the actress that played Judy changed. In fact, I believe the third actress that played Judy also appeared in the Gildersleeve show for a while, was that one that lasted the longest uh, on that program, um, that pretty much took over the role. And I could go on talking about it, just trying to remember all the shows, programs that I've heard, that are, I think, amazing. And I remember someone asking in Comic Book Roundtable about, the show Lights Out and Hippie collectibles. Hippie actually also mentioned Inner Sanctum. I've heard both shows. Um, and actually, I've heard those shows, through the web station. Actually, 1710 Antioch, AM 1710 Antioch, from, I believe it's in Illinois. It's in Illinois. I know it's in Illinois. Um, but yeah, I mean, my love for old time radio really comes from, was started by this guy, Superman, my all-time favorite character. And I guess I'll close now. Um, uh, uh, this first episode of Comics and Beyond, um, and seeing how comics brought me to a different type of hobby. Opened the doors to something different. Um, and the same thing goes for music and so on. But that's for another day, for another episode. So I end up saying that thank you for watching this very first episode of Comics and Beyond. I forgot to mention at the opening of the show what I hope this show will become. This is, for the time being, a pre-recorded show, and I'm hoping that at some point it will become live, and not just me talking like I've been doing right now for over an hour now. I have an hour and 3 minutes now, or no, an hour 2 minutes, almost an hour and 3 minutes talking about all-time radio. But my hope is that I could have a few live shows uh, with other people, talk with other people. Do a hangout. Bringing some people in and talk, not just comics, but their personal interests, their personal their favorite, their hobbies. We don't get to see too much of that here, and from time to time, we know people are interested in certain things. Um, so I'm hoping that Comics and Beyond will not just be me coming to you live if I ever decide to go live, but if I ever decide to go live, I want it to be a very dynamic thing. And uh, so uh, in the description, I will ask if anybody would want to join me in a live hangout one of these days for an episode of Comics and Beyond. I'll also do it on Twitter when I upload this video today. Today is Sunday. Uh, and ask if anybody wants to join me in a future episode. And I'm saying future episode because my idea is to do this on Sundays. Sundays on the weekend, sometimes very hard. It's family time, especially Sundays. So if any, so as long as I'm doing pre-recorded videos or pre-recorded episodes, I'll upload them on Sundays. If anybody wants to, if uh people wanna come for a live episode, those will go up whenever people have the time to be on the show. So maybe people can do it on Sunday, but they might be able to do it on Thursday or on Mondays or on Tuesdays. Then an episode of Comics and Beyond will go on that day if they can, or it could be a Saturday, and it just depends on the availability of people if they want to come on the show, and just make it dynamic. Just have a conversation about comics and everything pop culture and everything they're interested in. Good way for the members of the community um, to know other members of the community, and those who are new to the community as well. Get to know these great people who are on here on the YouTube comic book community. Um, and just make it talk about, and it doesn't have to be just about a hobby. I mean, we can talk about, the thing is, should be a big thing. It should be about comics, should be about TV, music, movies, whatever, pop culture, what they've been collecting, what how long they've been collecting. Just get to know each other a little bit better, I guess. That's my big goal for Comics and Beyond, besides me talking about me stuff. It's not just about me, it's about you. And so this should be up in a while. The description again, I'll be asking people if they want to join me in a future episode. Same thing will go on Twitter. If you don't follow me on Twitter, look me up as CR Infante. I think that's how I am on Twitter. One of my previous videos, I think, has the link to my Twitter, so you can follow me there as well. And like I always end my videos, until next time, keep smiling.